times people feel like they're eating healthy, but eating healthy doesn't necessarily correlate with eating right, because if your body's not digesting the food, then you're not really utilizing the food. So all right, so welcome to another edition of The Last Rep. I am your host, Devin Grogans. I'm here today with Ali Parkerson of Parkside Nutrition, and she's going to be filling us in a little bit on gut health, nutrition during the pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit about nutrition and fitness and all sorts of fun stuff. So as you can see on the screen here, she's got a really cool Instagram page, lots of good tips. So if you guys get a chance, definitely make sure head over to Instagram and check her out. I'll make sure that we get that information up here in a minute. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just let Ali kind of jump in and fill us in with how she got started and kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so I'm Ali. I got into nutrition, I think, later in college. I went to Western Oregon University for pre-physician's assistant and got to the last 2 years of it and really liked anatomy and that type of things. But my sister started to dabble in CrossFit and got a little bit into nutrition. We did our first Whole 30 challenge as a family, and I didn't have any significant health issues. I used to have migraines that would affect my vision, but I just felt so much better. And I was like, wow, this nutrition stuff is just so powerful. And it's something that we can completely control. So I just kind of got really hooked from there. Did a short nutritional therapy practitioner's certification after college to see how interested I was in it. Loved it, and then kept searching for a master's degree or some sort of grad school for it, and eventually stumbled upon University of Western States, their master's in human nutrition and functional medicine. And so completed that in 2018, and then took Parkside Nutrition full-time. And it was always kind of like a side hustle while I was in school, while I was doing certifications. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started. I really liked the chronic disease side of things. I played softball in college, and so I liked the sports nutrition side of things, and I go to a CrossFit gym, so that's really fun to dabble with as far as how to fuel athletes. But the chronic disease prevention just speaks to my heart. My dad battled prostate cancer for 14 years, and I think nutrition was something that was definitely lacking in his treatment plan, and that really kind of just lit a fire underneath me to really teach people how to eat on the front end. After college, before grad school, I also worked at a hospital in the kitchens, and I just saw all these super sick people struggling with these chronic disease and type 2 diabetes and all these things. And I was like, man, if I could have gotten a hold of you 20 years ago and taught you how to eat your vegetables and just live a healthier life, I felt like that was the way that I could make the most impact, is teaching people how to eat on the front end. So hence Parkside Nutrition, and kind of where I'm at now.
That's awesome. Is it weird that when I first saw you, I thought you were a softball player?
No, I'll take it. Yeah.
Good. And I don't mean anything. I grew up playing baseball, so It's just funny. I remember when we had met, I think it was down in Albany. I was like, she looks like she plays softball or played softball. So how long, so you've been doing Parkside Nutrition for a little over 2 years now. What types of clientele do you typically find yourself working with or looking for? And also, is there anything specifically that you specialize in? I was kind of rolling through your Instagram, and I saw everything from, blood sugar to I'm not even going to try to glycemia.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
But it looks like there's a lot of things that are kind of based around blood sugar and gut health.
Yeah, I think those are pretty fundamental for just making people more successful as far as dietary adherence. I mean, you hear a million people saying, oh, I've tried this diet, that diet, this diet. And they always have that feeling of failure that they're like, oh, I couldn't stick to it. And I was like, well, maybe some of these foundational pillars weren't, functioning optimally. So you think you failed when your body was like, no, actually, I need to address this first before I try to go into this massive calorie deficit. But right now I work with a lot of CrossFit athletes simply because they've known me for years. And then I finished grad school. I had one client, I'm like, why'd you start working with me? She's like, I saw you, or, I knew you through school and you were super nerdy about this stuff. So I figured, you could work your relationship. I'm like, yeah, that works. A lot of CrossFit athletes, weight loss clients, A lot of people don't really realize they have gut issues until we kind of dig in and start, like, we bring more awareness to the fact of what's normal, what's not. And so we kind of address those things as we go. Now I'm starting to get more people that know they have digestive issues and trying to like consciously address those.
Hmm.
So gut health a lot, but general weight loss, it's probably about a 50-50 split between the
Okay.
two.
So you had mentioned kind of getting somebody back to a base before trying to have them start a deficit or a diet. So what is your philosophy when it comes to getting somebody back to, kind of a baseline? What does that look like in terms of foods? And I know it's going to change for each person, but what are some of the things that you're looking for when you say, maybe right now is not the right time to start cutting? Maybe we just need to get you to a baseline, figure out what's working, and then we can start moving into a weight loss phase. What is some of those steps?
Absolutely. So the framework I kind of work within, the acronym is SPEAK.
Hmm.
So first we start with self-awareness, kind of get people to tap into where they're at right now, because a lot of people just aren't that aware of how either crappy they feel or good they feel or whatever it is. So we start with that piece. And the next piece is the pre-diet. So I think you have to earn your deficit. So you have to have those foundational habits to, you know, go into a calorie deficit. I mean, if you aren't going to the gym regularly, if you aren't drinking your water, if you're not going to the bathroom every day, if you're having these massive mood shifts and like, sugar cravings, like those are all things that might highlight, those things aren't working properly. Let's address some of those health issues, like besides the fact if they actually have like chronic conditions, either like prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, hypertension, anything else that they want to work on in that realm of things. But so that stage will kind of look at, your dietary or your lifestyle habits and all that stuff that needs to be working well to make the diet more efficient or effective. And then we also look at food intolerances. So if anybody, because a lot of people early on, I would ask like, oh, do you have any food or issues with certain foods or intolerances, allergies, anything like that? Like, no, I handle dairy, gluten, totally fine. I'm like, okay, cool. The reality is most people haven't taken the time to do a mini elimination diet, so they have no idea if that stuff's affecting them or not. And it can affect people in so many different ways. It's really hard to tell unless you spend the time and actually take that stuff out for a little bit. And if
Right.
you tolerate it and you add it back in, you notice absolutely nothing, no difference, that's totally fine. You can add it back in. People do fine with gluten. I think a lot of people have this fear of like, oh, if I take it out and I find out like it doesn't agree with me, then I have to actually do something about it, which is, kind of like, okay, you have to be an adult now, realize how things affect you and
Right.
make your own informed decisions. But so that's kind of like the big preface is like we have that pre-diet phase to make sure all that stuff's on board. And then, we're educating, which is the next phase of our framework. So people know why they're doing what they're doing. I'm not just trying to be mean and saying, no, you can't have dairy, you can't have cheese on your tacos or whatever. It's like, there's a reason behind this to make you more successful, or at least educate you in the process so you can make your own decisions, later. So that's the big kind of upfront piece.
Nice. Yeah, I find that ignorance is bliss to a lot of people. They figure, if it hasn't quite hurt me yet
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to remove it, then I'm sure I'm fine with it. But like you said, you got to be an adult and at some point, recognize, hey, this is something that I need to do. Couple of things that you had mentioned when you talk about doing a sorry, I forgot the name. When you're removing things.
Elimination diet.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. When you're doing your elimination diet, you're talking about removing different types of foods and then slowly adding them back in to find out what really agrees with your body and what doesn't. I like that you work a lot with CrossFit athletes because I have some performance specific questions that I wanted to kind of jump into. Being a trainer, nothing makes me more upset than when I hear other people say, oh, it's just calories in, calories out to lose weight. And I understand that at the base, yes, you need to make sure that you're expending more energy than you're taking in. That's kind of a fact. So I'm not going to disagree with that. However, when you come across the, if it fits your macros groups or the flexible dieting group, which I have my own kind of thoughts on the meanings behind those, but the people that are saying, well, I still have 60 grams of carbs left for the day, that means I can fill it with Pop-Tarts and Oreos or Doritos. And that's where, I start to really just disagree with a lot of those camps. And the reason being is I don't think, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, that a calorie is not a calorie. I don't think that taking in 40 grams of carbs through Doritos is the same as taking in 40 grams of carbs through sweet potatoes or rice, or anything that's going to be, I hate using the term clean foods, but that is a more healthier option. I think the body's going to process it different. You're going to see things like inflammation. Can you speak a little bit to that? Like, is a calorie a calorie?
1000% agree with you. I think like the laws of thermodynamics, like energy and versus energy, definitely play a role, and you can't ignore those. But there's certain things that regulate our metabolism. Our metabolism isn't stagnant; it's dynamic, depending. And calories, like food information you are putting into your body, that's information for your body. So,
I love that.
yeah, it's 100% information. So, I mean, you think about it, prehistoric times. And just an example of how dynamic our, metabolism can be is if food is not around, like that's sending the message to our bodies, like there's food scarcity, we need to decrease metabolism. And what that might mean is, still keeping that, calories in versus calorie out in mind. It's like, well, how does that happen? Well, your body naturally decreases your NEAT. So your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You don't move around as much. You don't fidget as much. You won't, voluntarily get up off the couch and go to the fridge or whatever. Like your body down regulates all those little movements to conserve energy. So that's one way, quote, our metabolism might slow down. And that's also going to affect our workouts. If I'm on a really low calorie diet, I'm not going to get as much out of my workouts because I just can't either reach that intensity. I can't, go for those extra couple reps or whatever it is. So that's going to be affecting it as well. So when people start to talk about like, oh, my metabolism has ramped down to a certain extent, but your metabolism probably isn't broken. But you're right. Like you can, diet down and eat whatever kind of cookies, donuts you want and get a six pack. You created a calorie deficit, but you didn't create health. Those are different things. And so if you want a balance of both, you're going to have to think about, what messages am I sending my body? Am I sending it like there's food abundance, there's, no stress in my environment, there's, all the additives and chemicals that go along with food. Am I, pumping that into my body as well? Or am I, feeding it nutritious stuff that tells it's like, here are the nutrients you need to decrease inflammation, decrease stress, properly detoxify things and like rebuild muscle when I break it down. So 100% agree. It's not just simple calories in, calories out. If you want really the whole picture of like optimal health.
That's awesome. Thank you. And yeah, I agree. I think, people tend to overlook things, like you said, like inflammation, cortisol levels, which make it very difficult for the body to lose weight if your cortisol is high. Same thing with putting on muscle mass and stress. So, I think a lot of that gets overlooked when you talk to the camps that are, you kind of eat whatever you want as long as you're in a calorie deficit. That kind of rolls me into my next question too, which is digestion and then correlation to nutrient absorption. I know it sounds similar, but I'm sure you can probably speak to this. But I guess what I'm getting at is making sure that, because I get a lot of clients that when they come to me, they say, well, I'm eating healthy. And many times they are. Eating healthy to me is, your whole foods, your chicken, your vegetables, your complex carbs, few simple carbs. Yeah. But really where the rubber meets the road is, are they eating the right foods and are they digesting those foods? And I guess I should say the right foods for them, because if you're not digesting your food, you're not getting adequate performance out of that. So can you speak a little bit to proper digestion and how to make sure you're getting good food absorption, things to take into account and so on?
Absolutely. And yeah, I agree. Like you can be putting the great, the right foods in, so to speak, but if you're not breaking them down efficiently, you're not going to absorb those nutrients. You can't use those nutrients to build new muscle or combat stress, detoxify, all that kind of stuff. So, and it's actually it can be more simple than people think. A lot of people think like, oh, I need to go, have this crazy fasting regimen. I need to have nothing but bone broth and like all these supplements and endless probiotics, and like that stuff can definitely help. But before you buy all that or like stress yourself out with that, it's like, am I eating, like, are my eating practices, like how the food gets in my mouth and like the situation around me, is that, set up correctly or for success? So am I sitting down and eating my food and chewing it till it's almost liquid, or am I eating a burrito in the car while I'm on my way to work or whatever it is? Like, that's a stressful environment.
Hmm.
And versus sitting at home, like chewing, putting your fork down in between bites, and those types of things. Like, am I in a right state of mind? Am I calm? I mean, if you think about, you walk into your grandma's house and you weren't hungry, but she's baking cookies, you smell it, and then like you start to instantly salivate, right? Like, that process of, like, I mean, ideally we're cooking our food, but that process is the beginning of digestion. It starts with seeing the food, smelling the food. That tells our brain that it's time to digest. We start to salivate. Then that tells our stomach to start to secrete digestive juices to properly break that stuff down. And that's how digestion is supposed to start, versus if we just like slam a smoothie in between, whatever we're doing at work, our body had no idea that we were about to eat, and it didn't get a chance to secrete everything to properly break down those nutrients. And especially like with a smoothie or something liquid, we're not chewing it. So it, again, doesn't get that signal to say, hey, we need to digest this stuff. And I know people have felt that, like, you slam a giant smoothie because it's so easy, it's so delicious, and then it sits there in your stomach. You're like, oh, I'm really full, because your digestion is trying to catch up. So that's going to sit there a little bit longer than maybe it would have if you actually took the time to like slowly digest it and absorb it and chew it better. But
That's interesting. So what are your thoughts on like a post-workout shake? I have two, usually when I'm working with a client, depending on where they're at, if it's a gaining phase, if it's a weight loss phase, I might just have them do a post workout shake. And for some, or for others, I should say, when we're looking at adding mass or size, a lot of times I'll make sure that they do a shake right after the gym and then go home, shower, change, give their body a little bit of time to kind of digest that, and then eat a whole food meal. So what are your thoughts on, consuming a post-workout shake, or would you say you're better off, if you can, just holding off, going home and eating whole foods?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I'm pretty moderate, and it sounds like you are too. I'm not in like the mindset of like, you're going to miss the window of gains necessarily. You are more, your muscles are more, or has, I guess, a higher absorption rate. When we are like, literally our muscles are hungry for that, replenishing the glycogen and protein and that type of thing. But I agree. I think my main thing is like just getting people to calm down after workout. So if you're still sweating, like just wait.
Yeah.
Like, so having, and because it's really about the state of that your body's in. So if you're just finished your workout, you're still in that fight or flight, that sympathetic state, and you're still kind of like jacked on adrenaline, that's not the time to eat. Like, that's when your blood flow is going to your muscles, not to your digestive system. So cool down, stretch. Once you start to feel hungry again, that's your body's natural cue to like, hey, I'm hungry, refeed me. Like, you just exerted all your energy on this workout. That's, your kind of signals to say, okay, blood can be diverted to the digestive system. We can digest this properly. We can prioritize that, because you're not trying to, pump a bunch of iron in the gym anymore. So just paying attention to those cues. And I think that really sets people up for long-term success after they stop tracking macros and stuff like that, because I think a biggest thing that I try to, make sure that my clients are aware of, and we still track macros. That's great information for me, because I know exactly what's going in. But especially as my clients start to graduate, is that we start to not track macros, and they are always paying attention to those natural cues of like, am I hungry? Am I not? Because that's really going to set them up for long-term success, versus like always relying on an app to tell them like, how much more can I have? Like, am I hungry? Am I not?
Mhm.
So, but I agree. I think, having, if they're in a gaining phase, yeah, like you need to get, a significant amount of protein in, enough calories in to build that new mass. And so that's going to take effort. So I agree with, getting maybe a protein shake in and then a meal shortly afterwards. I think that's perfect. Weight loss, it depends on, the overall intake. So
Sure.
I think that's a big misconception I see with a lot of CrossFitters, like, oh, I CrossFit now, so I need to have a protein shake afterwards, because that's what CrossFitters do. And I'm like, well, if you're trying to gain weight, like, or, lose weight, your 7-minute AMRAP in the gym didn't really create much of a calorie deficit. And then you follow it with a protein shake, you're not in a calorie deficit. So right. Yeah, I agree. I think the big picture kind of determines that.
Okay. And I noticed you said counting macros. I love that because I get a lot of people that either come to me or ask me questions, and I'm sure you probably do too, that talk about counting calories. So can you speak real quickly just to the difference and the importance behind counting macros versus counting calories, both mentally and physiologically?
hmm Yeah. So essentially, it's the same thing, but macros I think make people a lot more successful. Um, it depends on where someone's at. If they're able or they've been tracking and they're probably more advanced and they can track macros and manipulate that fairly easily. Some people will start with a calorie goal, or usually I'll give them a calorie goal and a protein goal because protein's super satiating, and so it'll help them decrease hunger. Because if you fill your, like you said, with if it fits not even fits my macros, fits my calories, they can have all the carbs that they want, but you're going to be so hungry, your blood sugar is going to spike, and then it's going to crash, and then you're going to be tired, you're not going to want to work out, you're going to be grumpy, and you're going to play in this roller coaster all day long if you're having all these high carb foods just within that calorie amount. You might lose weight, but you're not going to get the same results. So if we count macros, everything's pretty balanced. It teaches you a lot about what's in your food because people will have no idea, like, oh my gosh, the sausage is so many calories versus, having some lean meats in there too. Like, that's how we can kind of create balance and
Right.
educate people on what's in their food. And then they're going to be much better off.
I like that. Touching on one of the other topics that you hit on with metabolism, in regards to metabolism and keeping that high during a caloric deficit, what are your thoughts on diet breaks? I know that some people will do, 3, 6, 8 weeks, and then maybe like a 1 to 2 week diet break where you you bring the calories up a little bit to your new kind of resting point, or your new set point, I should say. So if you were eating, 3,200 calories, you went into a deficit, lost 10, 15 pounds over 8 weeks. Obviously, your new set point's not going to be back at 3,200. It's probably going to be somewhere around 2,000, maybe 25, or, whatever it is for that person. But what are your thoughts on bringing the calories back up for maybe a week or two? Typically, dropping a little bit of cardio out, and then after that week or two, going back into a diet phase. I'm just curious to talk to somebody that, can kind of speak to that a little bit more. I've talked to a few people, and some people look at me like I'm crazy when I mention it, but what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely agree. And it's something that I was missing when I had my own weight loss journey. I hired another like very popular nutrition coaching company, and it was effective, but they tried to diet me for like 6 straight months with very minimal like refeeds and diet breaks. And it led to like so much like disordered eating and like binging. And I was just like trying to do like CrossFit 2 hours a day, and then, and decrease my calories. And it was just, those are very different goals, right? Trying to
Right.
increase performance and lose weight. So yeah, definitely trying to implement diet breaks. And if nothing else, this is what prevents people from gaining it back or more after you're done dieting, so to speak, because you've practiced the skill of eating a little bit more, not diving off the deep end and having everything that's in your pantry, but like you've learned to maintain your weight. We've practiced that because we've had, diet breaks, like you said, maintenance breaks throughout our, dieting or health journey. So, and that's a skill that you have to practice. A lot of people tell me, and they come to me, they're like, I'm really good at losing weight, I'm really good at dieting. When they're on a diet, they're really good.
Hmm.
But I was like, you've never learned to maintain this and like do this as a long-term healthy strategy. You've been polar opposites, really good or quote really bad. And
Right.
it's like we got to find some middle ground. We got to practice that phase just as much as like the weight loss phase. And it's really good for your metabolism as well. And like you said, a lot of people think like, oh, I can go back to eating that way, but you're lighter now. You
Hmm.
don't need as much energy to move around. Now, if we implement and like periodize this and be really smart about it, we have a diet phase, we have a diet break, where we bring things back up to maintenance. We can go back into a fat loss phase if we want, if that's still what we need. Or we can switch gears and reverse diet and slowly increase calories and work on like a gaining phase. And so we can build more muscle. And then again, when we go back into a fat loss phase, guess what? You have more muscle. So you can diet off a higher amount of calories and you're much happier. You don't have to like stay at that low calorie intake. And that's ultimately what people want. I just don't think they have the patience to, steadily gain weight again, whether it's going to be lean mass. It's also going to be a little bit of fat mass. And I think people just don't quite, it's hard to see the whole picture and
Yeah, I
like the
agree.
gaining, yeah, that type of thing. So
Yeah, I find that when you talk to people about diet breaks, I've got mixed mixed reviews, because some people like the idea of, having a week where they can eat a little bit more. And then there's the other people where it's like, well, but won't I gain weight? And yeah, you might gain a couple of pounds. Realistically, it's probably going to be water weight from the increase of carbs and things like that. It'll go back down. We're not going off the deep end here, but I agree. And I think it does take the process a little bit longer, but it is a more stable, like you said, journey for the weight loss, because you are able to take away some of those cravings that can lead to binge eating and can lead to, cheats and that sort of thing. So that's awesome. I'm glad you were able to speak on that. In terms of satiating foods, which was something else that you had brought up, higher protein and things like that, during this pandemic, I know a lot of people find themselves snacking. They find themselves, pretty food focused and, hunger boredom, where they're just kind of eating because they're bored.
They're bored.
Ways that people can combat that while they're at home.
Yeah. So a little bit of like the physiology behind that is like when we're stressed, especially, boredom is another thing too, but we're all probably a little bit more chronically stressed than we realize. So when cortisol is high, one way to decrease that, because cortisol also increases your blood sugar. So if we give ourselves some carbohydrates, that secretes insulin, and that will bring cortisol down a little bit as well. So it's a calming mechanism. But one way, like you said, we can kind of prevent that is having a little bit more balanced meals. So we can just keep sending that signal to the body and the brain that like, I'm full, I'm satiated, I don't need this. And that's having balanced meals, like high protein, moderate fat, depending on what kind of macro balance or activity level they have. And especially with clients, initially when we went into this kind of lockdown phase, we kept working out and we were doing home workouts and stuff like that, but the intensity wasn't quite the same. And for some people, it really shouldn't have been the same. This was really stressful. We didn't need to add like a bunch of CrossFit. We switched to, hey, just move, whatever movement you can manage and sustain, let's do that. So that also meant usually decreasing carbs a little bit, not drastically, but we again wanted to make this super satiating. So I pushed, made sure protein was adequate, if not maybe a little bit higher, just so we can have that super, satisfying, I'm full type feeling. And then we also usually increase fats a little bit. So this allowed them to enjoy some other foods that were a little bit more satisfying again, because fat's more satiating. Fat and protein and fiber make your food stay in your stomach a little bit longer. It slows gastric emptying. So that again is going to help keep you full for longer, instead of, something that's high in sugar is just going to pass through your stomach pretty quickly, raise your blood sugar, crash your blood sugar, and then again, you find yourself in the pantry hungry again. So trying to avoid that negative pattern and trying to focus on those things that keep us full for longer. And then also match our new activity level as well, I think is, a good way to kind of switch things up.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like we have very similar philosophies. So yeah, I've been recommending a lot of the same things for my clients and people that have been reaching out. Same thing, lower the carbs a little bit to match, your workouts at home. Increase the healthy fats, more fattier foods like salmon, or, maybe get some steak in here or there. And then, yes, of course, fill up on the fiber and then up the protein. So that's awesome. I feel like we're kind of on the same level. When it comes to insulin response, and this is something I wanted to ask from a bodybuilding standpoint. When it comes to an insulin response, can you speak to how fat is stored in regards to how insulin is, I don't want to say maintained, but kind of how it peaks, or, peaks and troughs? What, when you see a high insulin spike, can you speak to kind of what causes high insulin to make fat storage, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a little bit of case of like the overall intake necessarily, and maybe probably like dose dependent. But
Sure.
One of the reasons, like the bodybuilder pattern of like, if you're gaining, or if you have small, frequent meals throughout the day, one, if you have a lot of food and a lot of protein to get in, that's one reasons, like to break it all up, right? So we can actually get that in and you're not feeling like overstuffed. But then that's also constantly secreting insulin. So you're constantly telling your muscles like build, build, build. And that anabolic, that building phase is what we kind of want. It's also, during a calorie deficit or cutting phase, you're also, able to manage hunger by having those constant meals, even though, because like the volume's really not that big if you look at the overall picture. But I think it's more about sending that message to the body as far as like building versus from a health standpoint, if we were to, switch that, because a lot of people, I mean, I was talking to someone else, they're like, don't get your nutrition advice off Pinterest. And I think one of the first things I remember seeing in college on Pinterest and about nutrition was like having everyone needing to have all these 6 meals, 6 small meals a day. And that's definitely one way to manage it. And it's, again, dependent on someone's lifestyle. If that's something that fits with them, that's perfect. I work with some like night shift or ER nurses, and that's just not practical for them to have, because they'll go like almost an entire shift sometimes and not get to eat or have much of a break because they're in a patient's room, and that's what their lifestyle demands. So that's where we would switch things and like implement some maybe like intermittent fasting so they can adjust and get their blood sugar to adapt to those longer periods without food. And so again, and especially if they're in a weight loss phase, we want them to be fairly sensitive to insulin. And so decreasing the amount it's secreted by having less meals less often. I think it's just mainly like which message you're trying to send for your overall goals.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Is there anything else that you want to mention or talk about?
If people are interested in learning more just about gut health, I have a free Facebook group that has 2 weeks full of daily videos as far as how to run through like a little mini elimination diet and just how to kind of reset your gut health if that's something that you're struggling with, whether it's bloating, constipation, gas, loose stools, any kind of migraines, symptoms like that they can't quite shake that are kind of labeled as normal. That's a good way to kind of start to address it. I put out a lot of free information in there as well. And then soon I'm also coming out with a gut health quiz that'll follow up with an ebook. And so you can kind of read through that and kind of do a lot of the work, at least initial steps by yourself to kind of get that on board. And that makes, whatever health or dietary goal you have after that a lot easier if you have that stuff set up and that strong foundation.
Okay. I'll make sure I put that link in the show notes. I believe I found it earlier because I think it's tied in through your Instagram, which brings me to the next point. If people want to reach out and contact you, what are the best ways they can do that?
Instagram works. My website, parksidenutrition.com, has an apply for coaching form there, and they can put their information through there. I get a little bit more information about them and their goals, and we can set up a free call and see if we'd be a good fit and a good team.
Sounds good. And then your Instagram is ali.parksidenutrition. And then is your Facebook the same, or is it just Ali Parkerson?
It should just be Parkside Nutrition.
Parkside Nutrition.
Parkside Nutrition.
Okay, so Facebook, Parkside Nutrition, and then Instagram, ali.parksidenutrition. So make sure you guys go on, check that out. Check out the link for the Facebook page, fill out the quiz, and reach out if you guys have any questions. I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me this morning. I know it was earlier than I typically do, but it sounds like you're up early, similar to me. So I love it. I've had a blast. I definitely would love to have you back. So if anybody has any questions, definitely shoot them my way and we'll see if we can get enough. I'd love to get Ali back on and just maybe do a 20-30 minute Q&A to where we can go through some of the questions, whether it's digestion related, whether it's sports nutrition, whatever it is, just let me know. Send them to either one of us and we'll see if we can't reconnect for another Q&A.
Absolutely. I would love it. This was really fun. I think we are on the same page for a lot of this stuff. So yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. You too. Thanks. Well, have a good rest of your weekend and I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right.